Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Emma Jones, founder of Enterprise Nation, which is the UK's most active small business network. Delighted to have so many of you with us on this webinar today. It's one of a number of webinars that we host, giving you all the tips that you need to successfully start and grow your own business. I think it is testimony that today's webinar has been so popular because of the topic and our speaker today. I'm very delighted that Rebecca Swift, who is the Director of Creative Planning at iStock, is our key speaker for today. And today's webinar will be a little bit different to the webinars we normally host. Rebecca will be actually delivering a presentation. So she will run you through a presentation for about 20 minutes on how to build a visual brand for your business. And we will be able to take some questions at the end. So the webinar finishes at 12:30. If you would like to pose a question during the webinar, you can do that in the GoToWebinar panel that you've got in front of you, or do feel free to tweet us, which is at @E_Nation. So feel free to either tweet Enterprise Nation, @E_Nation, or post your question direct into the GoToWebinar panel. But ladies and gentlemen, you have logged on to hear Rebecca Swift, so I am delighted to introduce you to the lady who is a branding guru. She's been at iStock for a number of years. She's also a consultant to some global brands when it comes to creative and brand strategy. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in virtually welcoming Rebecca Swift.
Hello, thank you very much, Emma. Thank you for joining this webinar here today. I'm going to talk a bit about visual branding, something you might have realised does need special attention in today's market. The opportunities of sharing images have grown immeasurably in the last few years, and any business, no matter how small, has the opportunity to compete in ways that were not available in the days when we just had TV and print advertising. And subsequently, any small business should think about their visual brand really early on. It's easy to manage when there are one or two people who have started a business, but as the business grows, hopefully, and the number of staff increases, clear, scalable visual guidelines are key. I've been fortunate enough to work with companies who are on the cusp of becoming a larger company, but their visual brand is in total chaos as more and more staff have become involved in using images on their website, in promotional material and across social media. And actually it's not just the small companies that have these issues. It's interesting how few branding documents put any emphasis on the visual, even in big multinational companies. What you tend to get with those visual guidelines are pages and pages of information about Pantone colours and logos and font shape and size, but the actual imagery itself is reduced to a page of images with crosses and ticks explaining what is on brand and what isn't. So a brand is defined as an intangible asset, but a brand can actually create tangible value, and I think Starbucks is a very good example of that. Your brand is not just your name, your logo, or your website. It is the experience. It is experience and the look and the feel that you bring to your customer. And a visual brand needs to embody the essence of that experience. So small businesses don't have the budgets of large companies, as we know, for advertising and marketing, but smart image choices are a great way of connecting your strategy with creativity. And who doesn't like looking at pictures? I certainly love looking at pictures. Your images should be the coming together of the analytical and logical parts of your business with the emotional and visual side. So choosing the right images should be a huge part of your working process. They should draw the viewer in ways that text very, very rarely does. A strong visual brand looks distinctive, and the strongest visual brand guidelines, especially the ones that I've been privy to, give a real sense of why the imagery is relevant to the target customer, what their particular needs from the imagery is, and more importantly, the emotional connection the customers should feel with the brand when looking at those images. An emotional connection is something I'll keep coming back to. It's very much a current issue for all brands, big and small. As photography has become more widespread and commonplace, filling a space with an old photograph is really not good enough anymore. And least of all, using an old dated stock image. So our audiences, both big and small, are more visually literate. They interact with images as part of their daily lives. I keep an eye on these statistics, and the range of images that we allegedly see every day ranges something between 3 and 20,000 images a day. So, you know, most of your customers know how photography, illustration, video, imagery in general works. They may even produce their own on their home computers or their mobile phones. They can spot a lack of effort in an instant. If your imagery is insincere, irrelevant, or cliched, the customer will switch off. An emotional connection builds loyalty and love for a brand, and what better way of evoking it than through images? So to showcase how image choice can influence a brand, as well as highlight the importance of visuals in brand design, I'm going to use a made-up brand called Simply Soup. Why soup? Well, it seems a relevant product to be talking about on a miserable winter's day here in London. And it doesn't get more generic than soup. It's a basic product. It's familiar to everyone, and it's available everywhere. So with this visual case study, I hope I'll demonstrate how the nuances of image choice can work with your brand without getting too hung up on specific brands that we already know. You might not feel that soup has anything to do with your own particular brand, but I hope that you'll see how photographic choices can alter the feeling of a visual brand. So there are a number of visual directions you could take with a soup brand. I'm going to talk about 4 different approaches, which I hope you can see on the screen now. The first one focuses on images of the pure ingredients. The second uses images of how the ingredients are grown and chosen. The third is about how food brings people together using families eating. The fourth is based on the professional or curated product using images showing chefs at work. And all 4 approaches could be developed into a strong visual identity for Simply Soup. Going through the different ideas one by one, just going to highlight how each of these approaches expresses different brand values and reaches different audiences. So first of all, this soup focuses on the ingredients of the product, showing vegetables and herbs in clean graphic close-ups shot on a white background. The main concepts this approach brings across is purity, freshness, health. And the audience of this style would resonate with is possibly the young and more likely the health aware. Here's some more examples of the type of photography that would work for this brand. The photography is clean and graphic. The images show the ingredients of the soup with no frills. This style enables colours to pop out from the background. These images should be super sharp. There's no room for soft focus here. The subject could be shot on white to support the idea of purity, health and freshness. It feels like everything is really clean, possibly a little clinical. The graphic nature of the imagery also means that the company using them could promote themselves as fresh. The target audience would most likely be the health aware, as I said before. Therefore, the concepts within the image should reflect health and purity. I can think of many toiletry companies and health supplement companies, for example, that use this approach with their own photography. Our second version of Simply Soup shows families enjoying meals together in authentic slice of life images. The visuals use focus on the everyday, moments of togetherness, bonding and love. The audience for a visual brand like this would be customers who are possibly buying for a family. The photography is authentic. It has a kind of slice of life snapshot feel. The images focus on everyday moments of family life. And families take all shapes and sizes. You know, it could be groups of friends, 3-generation families, single families, the variations go on. Highlighting moments of love and bonding. The photographer is immersed within the family. They are part of the moment. This is not kind of objective observational photography. It is a relaxed way of shooting. Some might call it photojournalistic, but it's essentially real life and those moments that we can connect with. This style can be broadened into using images from old family albums. In other words, images that look retro and nostalgic, perhaps with an historical view of how soup is made from generation to generation in a family. If you think about pasta sauce companies, they're very good at doing this style of imagery, for example. This brand targets families with an emotional approach to soup marketing. As I said, the concepts are love, bonding, togetherness, and also the sense of community that cooking and eating together enables. So a very different style of photography to the first one. The next visual approach gives a view of behind the scenes of soup production. It talks about concepts like quality and craft and would speak to an audience that has an interest in artisan and specialty food, foodies in other words. The photography is a cleaned up reportage style. It feels quite light and airy, even though it is reportage. The images are well lit, well composed, showing the behind the scenes of soup production. This brand talks very much to well-off food lovers, foodies. And the main concepts communicated through the pictures are the craft behind the product. Obviously, the craft is shown through the chefs at work and highlights the superior quality of this particular soup brand. I think key with this type of photography is to make sure that the techniques that the chef and cook are using promote a sense of precision and focus on the job in hand, and promote the sense of professionalism. Or perhaps you want to use an image of a chef looking at the camera, and this is, a classic technique with small businesses, is to show the people behind the scenes, and to show that they're real people, they're humans, and especially with something like food production and soup, it's to show that it's actually a human process, it's not an automated machine. And our last visual idea for Simply Soup is a very kind of down-to-earth, authentic approach, which focuses on the producers of the vegetables and other products that go into soup. It shows how those ingredients are grown. Photography is an authentic reportage style. The images focus on the origin of the ingredients and the producer behind the food. This brand targets adults who are interested in sustainable and green living. And the main concepts communicated through the images are organic, origin, and possibly also the idea of being locally sourced. This type of photography would involve portraits of the growers as they work with the crops and close-ups of the vegetables and the herbs themselves. This approach is intended to resonate with an audience for whom green living is very important and whom the sourcing, production, and sustainability of the brand is very important too. From the imagery, the customer gets a sense of provenance. The photography has a British or at most a European feel, so the company therefore feels local and part of the community. This is a much more local feeling brand to the last two, for example. And if we just have a look at the real world to kind of put this into some kind of context, so we look at PretAmante, for example, who very much promote themselves on the fact that they offer a fresh soup every day. And this is the front page from the PretAmante soup section on their website. And it utilizes the use of graphic imagery on white background, as I said in the first instance. And you can see that with this, there's quite a commitment to this kind of fresh look in their branding. There's an image of the finished product, but there's also a humorous angle, which we get with all of PretAmante's branding, which feels a little bit more irreverent. And that's, you can see there in the middle of the screen how the vegetables that go in the soup have been stacked up and being displayed in a more creative way. It's possibly not that clear because it's quite small, but it's the middle image. And then just as a contrast, here we have Yorkshireprovando, which is has a much more authentic feel. The visuals and the font give the impression of an independently owned cafe or a delicatessen. It does not feel like a big business. It has an organic feel through the way the product is placed on a dry stone wall, which we all know is very typical of Yorkshire. There's a farmhouse table, and the chef, who's called Belinda, I believe she started the company, which also gives it a very authentic and human feel. So, you assume that Belinda actually stirred the soup that you purchased, and you have a very strong sense of provenance and origin in this photography. So the key thing when thinking about a visual brand is thinking conceptually. And, I'd just quickly like to talk about concepts. Once you've determined what conceptual values you'd like to convey in your images, it's then time to think about how to source those images. If you know someone who's handy with a camera, and let's face it, we all do these days, then give them very clear guidance on what you're trying to say in your images, not just what you're wanting to have photographed. Where possible, collect examples of images that successfully represent what you're trying to say. And they can come from anywhere. They can come from your own photo albums, from your iPhoto stream. They can be torn out of magazines and newspapers, or saved from websites as visual references. If you do use stock photography, it can be pretty daunting when you go onto stock sites, because there are literally so many images to choose from. But stock websites such as iStock, and I'll talk about iStock because that's where I happen to work, offer images with lots of keywords attached. And some of these keywords are very straightforward, and you can find the keywords when you click on an image. They will actually be listed there. Some of the keywords are very straightforward. They are things like woman, family, outdoors, daytime, etc., which is just describing what the image is about. But there are also usually conceptual keywords attached. So, as I've spoken today, love, bonding, purity, health, origin, etc. And if you're able to attach conceptual keywords to what you're trying to say with your images, you'll find that you can be a bit more creative about how you use those images and the types of images that you want to use for your brand. If there are certain photographic styles that work really well for your brand, save the images in light boxes. Look at photographers' whole portfolios on these stock sites and see what else they have. They might have some other content that will also work well for your own brand. And there are always on stock sites the ability to search for similar images, so you can actually look broader than perhaps you'd started with your search. The other tip I'd add here is, if you find some images that work for you, check the keywords that are attached to those images and then use those keywords for yourself when you're doing your searches. The majority of customers that come to iStock still use very generic and indistinguishable keywords such as business. If you type business into iStock today, you'll bring up 1.3 million images, which, as I'm sure you're aware, is pretty overwhelming. So, if you're able to search conceptually, you will get a more interesting result. And if you are wanting to search by business, then search within and use conceptual terms to give yourself a more interesting and diverse range of images. And what I've done on this screen that you're looking at right now is just add some other conceptual keywords just to give you some ideas on the types of keywords you can expect to find on these images. On iStock, we also have the ability to find images that are not available anywhere else. Once you've conducted a search, should you do a search, on the left-hand side, there's a box where you can tick only from iStock, and these are our exclusive images, and they're not actually available anywhere else. So again, you'll get something a little bit different from what anyone else is using. So to summarize and to give you something a little more practical to work from, these would be my 4 simple tips for building a strong visual brand. Number 1, differentiate. I'm sure this is not news to anyone, but do take time to look at what your competitors are doing. Not just what service they offer or their pricing policy, but what images they're using to talk about themselves. Be aware of what works in your area of business and build on that for your own brand, but do not replicate, be different. It could be a difference in composition, it could be a difference in photographic technique, a viewpoint, a crop that makes your images look different. There's lots of different ways that you can actually differentiate yourself from your competitors. Number 2, find a visual language, a message within your images that is relevant to you and that represents your brand clearly. Don't overcomplicate it. If it's a type of imagery that you're drawn to, your customers will probably be drawn to that type of imagery too. Number 3, be consistent in everything you visualize. You'll actually get bored with your visual brand long before your audience will. Stay with it and it will become memorable. I always use the example of Coca-Cola, who've been using the same visual branding for over 125 years now. This is a mistake that many visual brands make. They change their visual brand before their customer has really embedded that visual language that they're using. The other thing that we come across a lot is business owners get very excited about new photographic styles and get distracted by the new filter on Instagram, for example, whilst not actually really appreciating what that particular style of photography does for the brand and how that fits or doesn't fit with the brand that you are conveying to the world. So be consistent. And finally, number 4, it's emotional connection again. Images are the easiest way to build emotional connection. And authenticity really is key here. A genuine message builds trust and connection. Tell your personal story through images. Use humor if that works for your brand. Think about the people you're representing in your images, what roles they're playing, what types of people you're using. Your audience will probably want to see people like them. We like looking at people like us, and this is absolutely key when building an emotional connection. And finally, looking for images, shooting images, using images is actually highly enjoyable. It's a lot of fun, and it shouldn't be a horrible chore. And so, enjoy it and make it a fun part of the day. That would be my advice. Anyway, I think we have some time for some questions. I'll hand back over to Emma. Oh, here she comes.
She's back. Well, this is what I was going to say. Well, first of all, thank you, Rebecca. That was fantastic. And one of your final lines there is, we all like looking at people. And just for everybody who's listening, forgive the slight noise. I am currently looking at people in Lisbon Airport. So apologies if you're hearing background noise, which I was told to mute earlier. But Rebecca, that was fabulous. A couple of questions that came into my mind, and everybody who's listening, do feel free to pose your questions now in the GoToWebinar panel, which you can do. A couple of really quick questions from here, Rebecca, is first of all, I love the fact that when you type into iStock business, you get 1.3 million images, because I'd love to show that increasing popularity of business. But I guess a lot of people listening will be thinking, can I do this on a budget? So as I'm starting out in business, and when you mentioned imagery, you said you can either do it yourself or buy stock imagery. So you do feel, do you, that at the beginning, as a business is growing, this is possible to do it on a budget by going to a friend, having that photography, etc. Can you talk through a couple of tips around how best to do that on a budget?
Yeah, and honestly, it depends on the type of photography that you want to use and what you determine your visual brand to be. There are many even much larger corporations who only use user-generated photography. So they ask their customers to submit images to their website, and that's a tactic that has been very popular in recent years. Using Instagram feeds and Tumblr feeds as their visual language. However, if you want to promote a very serious professional financial service or management consultancy firm, then user-generated imagery is not going to work for your particular visual brand, and you'll want your photography to represent your professionalism, in which case you will need to use somebody who's able to produce professional looking photography. Now, you might well have somebody who's able to do that. Certainly, most of the DSLRs that you can buy on the market these days are able to produce that level of photography. Even the iPhone produces a very high level of quality imagery. If you can trust somebody to do that, then ask them to do it. Otherwise, go to a stock site. You can pick up a subscription pretty cheap these days, and you can download as many images as you require, and what you're doing there is a shortcut, getting a shortcut to professional photography. And then as your brand grows, you'll get a better sense of where you should be investing your money. Are you investing it in bespoke commission shooting, or are you going to invest it in perhaps better stock photography, for example?
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Rebecca, questions are flowing in. I'm going to say that if we don't manage to answer your question today with 4 minutes left, we'll somehow try and see if we can cajole Rebecca to answer it in another way. But question coming from Brian Smith. How much of your visual brand images needs to be registered for intellectual property?
Oh gosh, that's that's a huge question. I think it's a personal choice. There is the expectation in modern business that if you're producing your own images, that whoever shot them has the copyright for those images, or if they've signed them over to the business that's using them, they therefore have the copyright for those images. So you don't necessarily have to register the copyright yourself. But it's always worth, if you are commissioning, it's worth crediting the photographer that you're working with. So it's pretty clear to anybody who comes across your website, for example, that those images belong to somebody. They're not what we call orphan images. They have a provenance, and that they belong to somebody. There is information on intellectual property online. We offer PDFs and presentations on that particular issue. Unfortunately, I'm not actually an expert in that, but we can certainly direct your audience to the right website to get more information on that.
Fantastic. And likewise, I think we can do a blog post on that on Enterprise Nation. So thank you for that, Brian. I'm going to try and do a couple of final questions, Rebecca. A question from Stephen Kwan. How important is video versus photos in building a visual brand?
Well, all of the data that we have either read in reports or generated ourselves has found that video increases the amount of time that customers spend on websites. It makes them more likely to click on links and on emails. So in that respect, I think the stickiness of video is much stronger than photography. Again, it has to be relevant, it has to be consistent, and it has to work for your brand. That would be my short answer.
As we're running out of time, but as you say, consistent across the brand. Great question in from Mike McCarthy. Would you say that poor imagery is worse than no imagery at all?
Poor, I'm sorry, Emma, you cut out. Did you say poor imagery is better than no imagery?
Yeah, no, sorry, quite the opposite. So the question is, would you say that poor imagery is worse than having no imagery at all?
Oh, absolutely. I think, now more than at any time in history, we are dealing with an incredibly visually literate audience, whether that's, your community in a small village, or you're talking on a global scale. You can't get away with using bad images. You can't get away with using horrible old-fashioned stock images, and you can't get away with using badly lit, badly composed, commissioned images. And the image don't have to be the best quality, and when I say that, I'm talking about in terms of professional quality, but they do have to have this emotional connection, and they have to tell a story. And I think that's been a key evolution of the use of photography in recent years has been this reliance on the visuals to tell a story, and if you're not telling a story, then you are going to lose your kind of customers' interest in that respect. And also, just to add another note, there is an expectation that a brand is visualized. In fact, maybe not visualizing a brand would help you to differentiate. I would never recommend that, of course.
That's what it's all about, is differentiation. Well, the clock has struck 12:30. It feels, as ever with these webinars, as if that was much quicker than 30 minutes. We have still got a lot of questions. We will talk to Rebecca at iStock to see if there's anything we can do to respond to those questions. I should say we have worked with iStock to develop an ebook on 5 steps to building your brand, which covers all of the items that Rebecca was covering today, as well as the voice of your brand, critically where to go and get advice and support on branding strategy. And that ebook will be out. It's free, and it will be out in the next couple of weeks. So do please keep an eye on iStock website and the Enterprise Nation website for that free ebook that we've done. But in the meantime, as we have hit now 12:31 and slightly gone over time, Rebecca, thank you for what was a very illuminating, and I'm just about to go off and have some soup because those images have compelled me to go and have some warm and hearty soup. But thank you for all the advice that you've given to the small businesses logging on today, and of course to all of you listening in. Thank you for attending. That was Rebecca Swift. I am Emma Jones, and thank you to iStock for all of your help to Enterprise Nation members. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you, and thank you for your attendance today.